Hey there, fellow travelers. Welcome to the Tolkien Road, episode 385. In this bonus episode of Do Not Be Hasty, we'll continue through the prologue to The Lord of the Rings by exploring the sections concerning pipeweed and of the ordering of the Shire. However, before we begin, I'd like to give a double up air five to our amazing fellowship. So stick 'em up, fellowship. 3, 2, 1. Whoopsht. Very nice. Special thanks to this episode's executive producers, Caitlin of Tea with Tolkien, John R., KG, Saber Systems, and Jeremy D. Also, a shout out to those celebrating their fellowship anniversary in August of 2024. The 1-year club, Emil K., Brian B., and Wilbo Baggins. The 2-year club, Ben D. and William J.H. The 4-year club, Henry B. and Jonathan L. Thank you all so much for sticking with us over the years. Well, as we discovered in the last episode, the prologue to The Lord of the Rings contains matters which don't, at first, seem to matter much to the overall narrative arc of the story itself. However, for Tolkien, the background and details matter immensely. It's why we wound up, for example, with a large volume of Tolkien's notes concerning things like the aging process of elves, as well as the flora and fauna of Númenor. For Tolkien, Middle-earth became an increasingly real place. Not that he was crazy. Instead, I'd say his creative process was informed by a strong mystical streak. While the titles of these sections may seem very dry, there are details herein which will serve to deepen our appreciation of the intricate narrative tapestry that Tolkien spent 15 years creating. All right, let's dive in. So, why write several paragraphs about pipeweed of all things, for a fictional universe where it plays only a small role in the details of the narrative? It's a great question. In one way, we can see this as a continuation of the previous section about Hobbit culture and history. In another way, it helps to deepen the sense of verisimilitude, that sense that we are reading about something that is real. Furthermore, some of the essential background will prove important much later in the story when we discover that Gandalf isn't the only wizard with an interest in the pipeweed. Finally, Tolkien himself loved a good pipe. Perhaps that's the only real reason we're given this essay. If Tolkien could create an entire legendarium based on his love of language, why couldn't he create a brief history within that legendarium for one of his favorite pastimes? All right, well, let's read the first paragraph of Concerning Pipeweed. There's another astonishing thing about hobbits of old that must be mentioned, an astonishing habit. They imbibed or inhaled, through pipes of clay or wood, the smoke of the burning leaves of an herb, which they called pipeweed or leaf, a variety probably of nicotiana. A great deal of mystery surrounds the origin of this peculiar custom, or art, as the hobbits preferred to call it. All that could be discovered about it in antiquity was put together by Meriadoc Brandybuck, later master of Buckland, and since he and the tobacco of the Southfarthing play a part in the history that follows, his remarks in the introduction to his herb lore of the Shire may be quoted. All right, so this is viewed as an astonishing fact about hobbits, almost as if they invented the practice. So we get that, this sense that, like, in the scheme of the Middle-earth legendarium, hobbits invented the art of smoking pipeweed, maybe. The rest of the insights are in the words of Mary Brandybuck from his work Herb Lore of the Shire. So really, this kind of continues with that whole notion, that whole sort of trope that Tolkien has, where he's pulling these different writings from, kind of compiling them from different sources, different ancient sources, many of them having to do with the Red Book of Westmarch. Obviously, we will talk about the whole, like, different sources and that kind of thing, actually, as part of the prologue in the next episode when we get to the note on Shire records. But kind of consider everything here in the rest of this section as being in the voice of Mary. So, paragraph 2 says, Hobbits claim it as their own invention. According to Mary, Hobbits can claim the smoking of pipeweed as their invention. Tobold Hornblower in the Southfarthing began to grow the true pipeweed in his gardens in the days of Isengrim II, who was the 23rd Thain of the Shire, around Shire reckoning 1070, which would be the Third Age 2670. The best varieties still come from the Southfarthing, Longbottom Leaf, Old Toby, and Southern Star. So just to make the connection, which I think is spelled out a little more clearly in this section, Tobold Hornblower being the originator of the pipeweed in the Southfarthing. That's where the name Old Toby comes from, right? So this would be like, Old Toby being his nickname, Toby Hornblower. So this is Old Toby's pipeweed, right? But the Southfarthing, just so we're clear, let's share our map of the Shire here. So the South Farthing would be this southern region down here. Not too surprising there. You see a little note to Longbottom, right? So that would be Longbottom Leaf over in this region. The Shire, not the Shire, but Hobbiton is, of course, up here. Bree is somewhere off in this direction. So, yeah, it seems to have originated in the South Farthing with Tobold Hornblower. All right. Toby may have learned it in Bree, where it now grows well on the south slopes of that hill. Bree hobbits claim to have been the actual first smokers. It was from Bree that the art of smoking the genuine weed spread among dwarves, rangers, wizards, and other wanderers, it says in paragraph 3. The home and center of the art is the Prancing Pony Inn, which, of course, is in Bree. And then finally, we get this note that Mary contends it is not native to Eriador, this larger region of Middle Earth here. So Eriador being just kind of boom, this whole large region here. It's not necessarily the plant itself is not necessarily original to that region. In fact, it came from the lower Anduin, where Mary suspects it originated in Númenor. In Gondor, it is known as Sweet Galenus, though esteemed only for the fragrance of its flowers. So just, again, so we kind of understand the picture there. If it came from the lower vales of the Anduin, so we're going a little south here. So we might look at this and say, okay, this is the lower vales of the Anduin, this kind of southern Gondor region here. So it seems to have originated there. That means that it probably originally came from Númenor, which is, again, just a kind of a fun note there, right? That the smoking, the weed that is used for smoking now by the hobbits perhaps originated in the region of Númenor. We also get an allusion to Gandalf from this section. It says, though one wizard that I knew took up the art long ago and became as skillful in it as in all other things that he put his mind to. All right, so Mary is saying, like, hey, this really did originate with hobbits. Not even the wizards thought of it before us. So, this is something that we really gave to the broader culture of Middle Earth. It's something we can really be proud of as hobbits. Though he contends that Gandalf, this wizard he alludes to, took it up and was very skillful in it. Just a brief section, but it really sort of fills out this whole notion. And of course, the whole idea of pipeweed, it plays a more significant role in the story than you might think. It's not like a very central matter, but as we get further along over the course of the next several years, going through our deep read of The Lord of the Rings, we'll see this play out. But it's interesting to just kind of have a knowledge of this background. It really helps to sort of just deepen your appreciation for the work as a whole. All right, the next section of the prologue we're going to look at is of the ordering of the Shire. So we'll turn our attention to further details about the Shire itself, and especially its laws, governing customs, and enforcement officials. So the first thing we get from this section is that the Shire was divided into 4 parts, or farthings. So we've already discussed the South Farthing, of course, and it's pretty straightforward, right? You got the North Farthing, the West Farthing, the East Farthing, and the South Farthing. So you can see here on this image of the Shire that it's pretty straightforward how to divide it, though they're not exactly divided perfectly into 4 quadrants. What's interesting is if you zoom in here, you can see this 3 farthing stone right here. And it's called the 3 farthing stone because it's a point at which the West Farthing, the East Farthing, and the South Farthing all connect. Right. Some states have little markers like this where, 3 or 4 or 5 states like connect in one place. So it's kind of fun. You go to that spot, you can step over the line and be like, oh, I'm in, I think there's one in New Mexico, maybe New Mexico, Colorado, Texas, and Kansas maybe. But you can kind of like step over the line and you're like, I'm in Colorado, I'm in New Mexico, I'm in Texas, I'm in Kansas. Right. But the North Farthing does not connect here. So the North Farthing is has its border a little further north, and does not actually border with the South Farthing. It just borders with the West Farthing and the East Farthing. We see here that Hobbiton is in the West Farthing, just kind of on the edge. So it's pretty close to the center of the Shire, according to this map. And that these regions are further divided into subregions, which bore the names of leading families. So you have Buckland in the east. Buckland, of course, being over here where the Brandybucks were kind of in charge, and the Tookland, right? So this being over in this region of the West Farthing, Tuckborough being kind of the home of this area, or the center of this area. You know, one thing I didn't look up that I really want to take a quick gander at is what the word farthing actually means. So let's see here. According to my investigation on Google, farthing is a... no, let's see. That's not it. Oh, okay. It means quarter. Okay, so it's Old Norse. It comes from the Old Norse word which means quarter. All right, so or fourth. So that makes sense. It's a fourthing, right? Interesting. Okay. So we go back to the text. Paragraph 2. Not much it says was needed for the government. Families managed their own affairs. Growing and eating food occupied most concerns, and as a rule, they were generous and not greedy, so there was much stability in estate and trade. All right, this kind of fits with the whole, discussion we had on the last episode of the prologue. You know, the hobbits were not like creatures that were out to dominate one another, right? This may be simply due to the fact that they knew they were, the smallest folk in a larger world. And it was probably smarter of them to band together for their own mutual good and protection. Especially since they were going to have outsiders passing through because they were in charge of maintaining kind of this passageway through Ariador. So as a rule, they were generous and not greedy. We really see that, I think, in the little vignettes we get of the hobbits. Even though they're humorous, we get these vignettes of the hobbits in A Long Expected Party, especially. Paragraph 3 speaks of the King of Fornost in the Shire. As you recall from the last episode with concerning hobbits, the King of Fornost was this Dunedain ruler who lived just north of the Shire and gave the hobbits the Shire in the year 1601 of the Third Age, which became the start of 1401 of the Third Age, which became the start of the Hobbit Reckoning, or the Shire Reckoning. So the King of Fornost, by the time we get to the story of Bilbo and Frodo, is long gone, right? The kingdom of Arnor was in decline at the time that the Shire was established, and it just takes a few hundred more years until it's essentially a ghost kingdom. It's not really much of a kingdom anymore at all. So it says wicked and wild things had not heard of the king. So in other words, the hobbits would say that wicked and wild things had not heard of the king. You get little allusions to this within the text where the hobbits kind of talk about when the king returns, and they're referring to this king of Arnor, right? They're referring to this king of Arnor who, even in their time, when the king of Arnor was a long gone historical reality, they still referred to him, right? They still referred to him, and they still kind of viewed themselves ultimately as in subjection to him. And it says they kept the ancient laws because they were the rules, both ancient and just. All right, so we don't think of this first when it comes to hobbits, but the hobbits were in general kind of rule followers, right? They understood the importance of rules, and they they respected what they understood to be the rules. That's a funny little note for me when I think of the riddle match between Bilbo and Gollum and the back and forth that goes on between them, and the idea that they there's like these established rules of riddles, right? So I think this just further goes to illustrate like the simplicity of Hobbit society, and the simplicity of Hobbit culture. They weren't complex. They weren't high-minded people. They were just content with living in their area of the world and in being left alone, really, it seems like. Paragraph 4 speaks of the Thain and the Took family. Of course, the Thain is this ruler of the Shire that we hear about from time to time. The Took family was long preeminent. You'll recall from the last episode they were descended from the Fallowhide strain of the Hobbit predecessors. They were so they were kind of natural leaders, if you will, right? The Thain came from the chief Took, who was the master of the Shire Moot and captain of the Shire Muster and the Hobbitry in arms. These were emergency orderings, so they didn't have like big standing armies or anything like that. But if they did have need of these things, they were able to call on them, and the chief Took was the one who would lead these things. So the Took, as you know, they would simply refer to the Took as the head of the family, and this was often the Thain, right? So that's the term we have here. Thain, such an interesting word. Again, I didn't actually look this one up, but let's see if I can find it. I wonder if it's I wonder if it's actually a real word, or one that Tolkien came up with for the sake of the hobbits. Let's see. Status for a noble retainer or attendant. Oh, interesting. All right, so it's from an Old English word, which is Thain. All right. So that would be what the Thain is, right? So it means follower, and I think in this sense, noble retainer or attendant. I think all of these meanings work because the Thain was probably seen to be in subjection to the Dunedain king, the king of Arnor, but was also a noble retainer or attendant. So he was kind of seen as the king's man, right? The king's hobbit, if you will, in the region. So that is the office of the Thain. Paragraph 5, we learn of the mayor of Michel Delving and other officers. The mayor of Michel Delving was elected every 7 years. Let's just take a look at the map to see where Michel Delving is again. So Michel Delving, you can see, is just to the west. It's kind of on the western edge of the Shire. If we look at our larger map of Middle Earth, go back up here. Let's see, is it shown on here? It doesn't appear to be shown on this larger map, but it's pretty close to the Tower Hills. So we'll kind of put it in the Far Downs region over here. So the mayor of Michel Delving was elected every 7 years. He was also the postmaster and the first sheriff, so he managed both the messenger service and the watch. So, I don't know, maybe we think of like, so if you think of him as kind of like, the sheriff, he kind of maybe was in charge of managing the domestic affairs. If there was any need of management, again, really, with hobbits off, it seems like there wasn't much need of this on an ongoing basis, only like kind of more unusual basis, extraordinary basis. The Thain, probably more of the foreign affairs minister, if you will. So maybe that's the broad way of thinking of these things. The Thain being more like foreign affairs, but foreign affairs for the hobbits being like, interactions with the king of Arnor, essentially. And then the mayor of Michel Delving being more of a domestic affairs, sort of ruler. We learn a little bit in paragraph 6 about the sheriffs, which are, essentially the Hobbit police. It says the sheriffs, there were only 12. Only 12 for the whole of the Shire at any given time, 3 for each farthing, and they were mostly concerned with keeping beasts in line, right? So they weren't really concerned with like policing fellow hobbits so much as keeping beasts in line, making sure that the beasts weren't troubling the other hobbits. There was a larger body, the Bounders, that could be employed for beating the bounds, i.e. to keep an eye on outsiders. So they did have, again, a larger group that they could pull from, but normal times, ordinary times, it was just these 12 sheriffs who were the sheriffs for the whole of the Shire. It's kind of a mind-boggling when you consider the size of hobbits and also the size of the Shire, right? We talked about that some in the last episode. I likened it to, a kind of a small to mid-sized European nation like Belgium, Netherlands, Ireland, Switzerland. Those are not small regions. Like you think about, I can't imagine that those countries just have like 12 officers of the law, right, at any given time. There's got to be many more than that, you'd think, right? Of course, you're talking about human affairs and not necessarily Hobbit affairs in that case. But I guess it just it goes to show how peaceful of a society the Hobbits really were. Paragraph 7, the Bounders were increased around the time of the Fellowship. Let's read this paragraph about this. So at the time when this story begins, the Bounders, as they were called, had been greatly increased. There were many reports and complaints of strange persons and creatures prowling about the borders or over them, the first sign that all was not quite as it should be and always had been, except in tales and legends of long ago. Few heeded the sign, and not even Bilbo yet had any notion of what it portended. 60 years had passed since he set out on his memorable journey, and he was old even for hobbits who reached 100 as often as not. But much evidently still remained of the considerable wealth that he had brought back. How much or how little he revealed to no one, not even to Frodo, his favorite nephew. And he still kept the secret ring that he had found. Of course, that leads into the next section, which we'll talk about in the next episode. But we get this sense that the Bounders do play a part in the Fellowship of the Ring. That's how we kind of know the status of, the various outsiders who are visiting and that sort of thing. But the most important line here is probably, all was not as it should be, right? We get into the time of the Fellowship, the opening of the Fellowship, and we are entering an extraordinary time for the Shire when all was not as it should be. All right. So if these sections of the prologue did nothing more, they certainly served to give us a clearer picture of Hobbit culture and to increase the verisimilitude of Tolkien's subcreations. Still, I for one find myself with a lingering desire to give Longbottom Leaf and Old Toby a try, or at least to catch a whiff of Sweet Galenus just one time. And it is nice to know just why the Tooks and the Brandybucks seem to be such important families. In the next episode, we'll conclude our journey through the prologue as we consider the sections of the Finding of the Ring and Note on Shire Records. All right. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please consider supporting us in one or all of the following ways. First, join the Fellowship of the Road by visiting patreon.com/TolkienRoad. When you join the Fellowship of the Road, it helps us to keep on evering on and lands you some cool perks along the way. Learn more at patreon.com/TolkienRoad. Second, if you're watching, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and let us know what's on your mind in the comments below. Finally, subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes or the platform of your choice. If you are a 5-star fan of the Tolkien Road, you can really help us out by heading over to iTunes or your preferred source for the show and dropping us a rating and review. When you do that, it helps get the word out about the Tolkien Road, which helps us to keep on evering on. As always, keep the correspondence coming. We'll do our best to respond to you somehow and at some point. With Do Not Be Hasty, we'll let the mail pile up and then do a big mailbag episode at the end of each chapter. While we can't promise you that your mail will be read on air, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, so drop those comments and send those emails. Finally, don't forget to stop by TrueMistPress.com for great merch like super styling and comfy Tolkien Road t-shirts, Two Trees camper mugs, and signed copies of my books Tolkien's Requiem and Tolkien's Overture. Once again, that's TrueMistPress.com. Thanks for supporting our work with your purchase. To close, as always, we'd like to thank our amazing fellowship. I know, Greta's not with me right now. She will be back soon, right? She'll be back as we continue through the story itself. I know all of you half as well as I should like, and I've thanked less than half of you half as well as you deserve. Special thanks to the following: John R., Caitlin of Tea with Tolkien, KG, Melkor27, Saber Systems, Jeremy D., Emilio P., Jonathan D., Richard K., Paul D., Julia, Wordy, Chris B., 2or91, Carolyn S., Emil K., Brian O. II, Jonathan R., Matthew W., Daniel D., Harrison C., Jason C., Seb M., Wilbo Baggins, Ms. Anonymous, Andrew T., Redhawk, Shannon S., Brian O. the First, Zeke F., James L., Chris L., Aja V., Isha the Hammer, Teresa C., David of Pints with Jack, and Eric B. Finally, thanks to all for watching and or listening. Until next time, the road goes ever on. Bye-bye, everybody.